Omega faces Alpha King under the starlit canopy as ancient constellations shift around her shape. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily Vance, a quiet and gentle Omega, had never truly felt like she belonged. She lived on the outskirts of the pack, always watching from a distance as the others found their places in the world. Rejected by her own family for being insufficient, Emily had long ago learned to keep to herself. No one could understand what it was like to feel invisible, to be labeled as weak, or worse, unwanted. But beneath her quiet exterior, a force greater than she knew was stirring, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment arrived under a sky filled with ancient constellations, when the world seemed to hold its breath. The forest surrounding her was calm, eerily silent as she walked through the shadows, her thoughts as tangled as the vines beneath her feet. She had ventured far from her pack's territory, hoping for a moment of peace, when something unusual caught her attention. A figure, motionless yet powerful, lay in the moonlight. She approached cautiously, heart racing as she recognized the torn and bruised form of a man who seemed to be in pain. Emily bent down, her instinct to help kicking in before she could question why. She didn't know him, but his presence was undeniable, his energy intense. As she reached out to touch him, a strange warmth filled her chest, a quiet whisper urging her to save him. Unbeknownst to her, the man was no ordinary person. Duncan Blackthorne, the Alpha King, had disguised himself and traveled far from his throne in search of something. Or perhaps, someone. His eyes flickered open as Emily's hands hovered over his wounds. They locked gazes, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Duncan had been prepared for many things, but not for the pull he felt towards the seemingly fragile Omega who was now tending to his injuries. She was unlike any other Omega he had ever encountered. There was strength in her touch, an unexpected tenderness in her eyes. Duncan knew that this was no accident. He had been searching for her, and now, fate had brought them together. But Emily had no idea of the magnitude of this moment, no understanding of the destiny unfolding before her. As she continued to heal him, the constellations above began to shift, their patterns aligning in a way that had not been seen in centuries. The stars whispered of old prophecies, of a bond stronger than blood, a connection forged by destiny itself. Duncan could feel it too, the pull growing stronger with every passing second. And in that moment, under the starlit canopy, Emily Vance unknowingly sealed her place as the Alpha King's fated mate. As Emily's hands gently pressed against Duncan's wounds, she felt a strange, calming energy flow between them. The warmth of her touch seemed to soothe the Alpha King's pain, but it also stirred something deeper within her. Duncan's gaze never left her face as she carefully worked, unaware of the immense significance of the moment. His body, once stiff and unyielding, seemed to relax under her care. The more she healed him, the more the air between them seemed to crackle with an unspoken connection. But Emily, oblivious to the destiny unfolding around her, simply focused on the task at hand. She had always been taught to be kind, to help those in need. But this man, this stranger, was different. There was something about him that pulled her in, something both terrifying and captivating. She couldn't explain it, but she felt an undeniable urge to protect him, even though she had no idea who he was. After what felt like hours, Emily finally stepped back, her hands tingling with the energy that had passed through them. Duncan's wounds were healing, the blood had stopped flowing, and his breathing had steadied. He slowly pushed himself up to sit, wincing slightly but clearly stronger than before. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time, Emily saw something other than pain in his gaze. There was recognition, something deep and ancient. "You saved me," Duncan murmured, his voice rough but filled with awe. Emily blinked, taken aback by his words. I just did what anyone would do," she said softly, her voice trembling. Duncan shook his head slightly. "No, not anyone," he said, his eyes scanning her face as if searching for something. Emily felt a strange flutter in her chest at his intense gaze, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. She had no time for such thoughts. She had to leave, to return to her pack. You should go, Duncan said suddenly, breaking the silence. The danger is not over. I can't stay here. Emily nodded, still unsure of what to make of this mysterious encounter. I understand. Thank you, for letting me help. As she turned to leave, she felt a strange tug in her chest, a pull that seemed to come from deep within her. It was as if something in the air had shifted, something that connected her to this man in a way she couldn't explain. But she ignored it, determined to get back to her pack. She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the quiet forest. But as she moved further away from Duncan, she heard his voice again. Wait, he called out. Emily paused, her heart skipping a beat. She turned to see Duncan standing, now fully healed, though he still seemed distant, as if struggling with something. I need you to know something, he said, his voice low but firm. You are not just anyone. You are, my mate. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at him, trying to process his words. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, but all she could manage was a confused, what? Duncan took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't understand yet, but you will. You and I are bound by destiny. I have known it since the moment you healed me. Emily shook her head, her mind whirling. This doesn't make sense. I'm nothing special. I'm just an Omega. Duncan's gaze softened as he took another step closer, his presence overwhelming. You are more than you realize, he said, his voice filled with an intensity that left no room for doubt. You were meant for something greater than this. And I was meant for you. Emily stood frozen, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy blanket. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, but the idea of being his mate, of sharing a bond with him, felt impossible. She had always been told that Omegas were weak, that they were nothing compared to Alphas. And yet, here was this powerful man, a king no less, telling her that she was destined to be his. It didn't make sense. But deep down, she felt it, the truth of his words, the undeniable connection between them. The starlit canopy above seemed to shimmer with an ancient energy, as if the very universe was confirming what Duncan had said. Emily's heart beat faster as she realized that her life was about to change forever, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Emily stood there, her breath catching in her chest as Duncan's words lingered in the air between them. You are my mate, he had said. The words echoed in her mind, refusing to fade, as though the very stars above had conspired to bring them together. Duncan took a slow step forward, his presence commanding, and Emily's heart raced in response. She wanted to deny it, to run from the confusion and the uncertainty that filled her, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet intensity, that made her hesitate. She had always believed Omegas were destined for weakness, that they were meant to be overlooked, but Duncan's declaration shattered all her previous beliefs. How could this be? Emily asked, her voice trembling. I'm not special. I'm just an Omega. Duncan's gaze softened, and he took another step closer, until they were only a few feet apart. You are more than you know, he said, his voice deep and reassuring. The connection between us has been written in the stars. It has always been this way. Emily's pulse quickened at the closeness between them. She could feel the heat radiating from Duncan's body, could sense the power that surged through him, but there was something else, something tender, hidden beneath the surface. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions, none of which she could voice. She had never imagined that this would happen, never dreamed that someone like him, an Alpha King, strong and commanding, would say such words to someone like her. And yet, here they were. I never asked for this, she whispered, her eyes downcast, unable to meet his. I never wanted to be anyone's mate. Duncan gently lifted her chin with his fingers, guiding her gaze back to his. I understand, he said softly. But sometimes, fate chooses us, whether we are ready or not. You were meant for me, and I was meant for you. Emily felt a strange warmth spread through her at his words, a warmth that started in her chest and spread through her veins. It was like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm, sudden, powerful, and full of promise. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the world shift around her. She was torn, unsure of what to feel or what to do next. She had spent so long believing that she was unimportant, that she had no place in this world, and now everything was changing. Everything she thought she knew was being upended. I can't be the person you think I am, she whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. Duncan's hand remained on her chin, his thumb brushing softly across her skin. You are exactly who I need, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. And together, we can face whatever comes next. Emily looked up at him again, and for the first time, she saw not just the Alpha King, but the man beneath the title, someone who was willing to see her for who she truly was. The weight of his words settled over her, but she still couldn't shake the fear that had taken root deep inside her. What if she wasn't enough? What if she couldn't live up to the expectations of being his mate, his Luna? Duncan seemed to sense her hesitation, and without saying a word, he reached out and cupped her face gently in his hands. His touch was warm, soothing, and for the first time, Emily felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. You are not alone in this, he said, his eyes searching hers. I will stand by you, always. The words were simple, but they held so much weight. Emily felt a deep, undeniable connection to him, one that went beyond the surface, beyond the titles and the expectations. It was something ancient, something that had been waiting for them both. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Emily took a step toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. Duncan's expression softened, and he held out his hand to her. Without a second thought, she took it, her fingers brushing against his, and in that moment, she knew that her life was about to change forever. Together, they would face whatever the future held, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were filled with a strange, palpable tension. Emily could feel the shift within herself, the pull towards Duncan growing stronger with every passing moment. They spent hours together, discussing the pack, the world around them, and the future. Duncan never once wavered in his belief that she was the one meant for him, but Emily, despite her deepening feelings, still struggled with the reality of it all. She had been raised to believe that Omegas were weak, insignificant, and now, in the face of the Alpha King's unwavering certainty, she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly worthy of the life he was offering. Each night, as the moon rose high in the sky, Emily would find herself gazing up at the stars, feeling the weight of Duncan's words. We are bound by destiny, he had said, but what if destiny had made a mistake? What if she wasn't strong enough to be the Luna, the mate of the Alpha King? But each time she looked at him, each time their hands brushed where their eyes met, a sense of peace washed over her. Maybe she wasn't meant to understand it all right away. Maybe the path ahead was about learning to trust herself, to trust him, and to trust the connection that seemed to grow between them. One evening, as they walked through the dense forest, Duncan stopped suddenly, turning to face her. His expression was serious, his eyes intense in a way that made Emily's heart skip a beat. There is something I need to tell you, he said, his voice low. Emily's heart raced, and she instinctively took a small step back, suddenly feeling vulnerable in the quiet of the woods. Duncan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. It's about our bond, he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. It is more than just a connection between us. It's ancient, stronger than anything we've known. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Duncan took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. There is magic in our bond. Magic that has been dormant for centuries. It's not just a mating bond, it's a soul bond, one that ties us together in a way that cannot be broken. Emily's eyes widened, her thoughts swirling with the implications of his words. Magic. Soul bond. She had never heard of anything like this before. But what does that mean for us? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Duncan's grip on her hand tightened, but there was no sense of pressure, only a quiet reassurance. It means that we are tied to each other in more ways than one. Our fates are linked, Emily. Our strength, our power, our love, it all comes from this bond. And together, we can do things that neither of us could do alone. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and excitement rushing through her. She had always thought of herself as small, as insignificant. But Duncan was telling her that she had power within her, that their bond could unlock something greater than either of them could have imagined. You are not alone in this, Duncan continued, his voice soft but firm. I will stand by you, always. No matter what comes. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at him, searching his eyes for any hint of doubt, but there was none. His words, his touch, everything about him told her that he was serious. That he believed in her. For the first time, Emily felt a spark of hope deep inside her, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be the mate Duncan needed. Maybe she could rise to the challenge. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. As the night air wrapped around them, the stars above seemed to shine even brighter, their ancient light casting a glow on the path ahead. Together, they would face whatever came, and Emily knew that, for better or worse, her life was no longer just her own. It was bound to Duncan's, and she would have to find her place in this new world. But one thing was certain, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The following days brought with them a sense of calm Emily had never known. She woke up each morning beside Duncan, the weight of the bond they shared settling into her bones, a constant reminder of what they had begun. The forests around them were quiet, as though they too were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. Duncan had been patient with her, giving her space when she needed it, yet always close enough for her to reach out to him whenever doubt crept in. She still struggled with the enormity of the bond they had forged. Every time she thought she had a grip on it, another wave of uncertainty would crash over her. Could she really be the Luna, the mate of the Alpha King? She was an Omega, after all, weak, broken in the eyes of her pack. The idea that she was destined for something greater felt like a dream she was not yet sure she was ready to live. One evening, Duncan led her to the edge of the forest, a place where the trees opened up to reveal a sprawling meadow bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. The air was crisp, cool against her skin, but the warmth of Duncan's presence beside her made her feel at ease. "Do you see that?" he asked, pointing to the horizon where the sky seemed to stretch endlessly. Emily looked up, her eyes following the direction of his finger, but it wasn't just the sunset that captured her attention, it was the way Duncan was looking at her. There was something in his gaze, a silent question, a challenge, maybe. She turned her attention back to the horizon, feeling the weight of it all settle in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft, uncertain. Duncan's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "It's the future, Emily. It's the life we'll build together. Every step we take from here will bring us closer to fulfilling our destiny." Emily swallowed, the words sinking deep into her heart. She had always been taught to fear the future, to stay in the shadows, never to reach for something more. But Duncan was showing her a different way, a way that was full of possibilities. "I don't know if I can live up to it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Duncan stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "You already are," he said, his voice low and full of conviction. "You're stronger than you think. And together, we will face whatever challenges come our way." Emily felt a warmth flood her chest at his words, a warmth that was both terrifying and comforting. She had never believed in herself the way Duncan did. She had always been the quiet, unseen one, the one who could be overlooked. But with him, she felt seen, truly seen for the first time in her life. "What if I'm not enough?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Duncan's thumb brushed gently across her cheek. "You are more than enough, Emily. You always have been." His words, so simple yet filled with so much meaning, wrapped around her like a shield, protecting her from the doubts that had taken root in her heart. She had spent her entire life feeling like she was too much of a failure to be loved, too weak to be important. But here, standing with Duncan in the quiet of the meadow, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. "I'm afraid," she confessed, her eyes lowering as she fought back the tears that threatened to spill. "I'm afraid that I'm not strong enough for this." Duncan's hand gently cupped the back of her neck, pulling her in close. "You don't have to be strong alone," he murmured. "We are in this together. I will always be here, by your side, every step of the way." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the sincerity in his words, feeling the bond between them grow stronger. She had been alone for so long, fighting her own battles, always believing that she wasn't worthy of someone like Duncan. But now, she knew she didn't have to fight alone. With him, she had a chance to be more than she had ever dreamed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and purple, Emily felt something shift within her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was willing to face it. With Duncan beside her, anything felt possible. The days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself adapting to a life she had never imagined. Duncan had kept his promise, standing by her side, guiding her through the complexities of their new bond. They spent their days training together, learning about each other's strengths and weaknesses, and growing closer with every passing moment. Emily was still hesitant, still unsure of her place, but each time she doubted herself, Duncan was there, reminding her of her worth. It was on a crisp autumn morning when the reality of their connection became undeniable. They were in the training grounds. Surrounded by the towering trees of the forest, their leaves turning golden in the cool breeze. Duncan stood across from her, his posture strong, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Remember," he said, his voice calm but firm, "the strength you seek is already within you. You just have to believe it." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She had always been told that Omegas were weak, that they had to rely on others, but here she was, standing in front of the Alpha King, training with him, and she felt something stir deep inside her. It wasn't just her body responding, it was her soul. Duncan raised an eyebrow, sensing her hesitation. "Trust yourself," he said softly, stepping closer. "Trust the bond we share." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the wind and the rustle of the leaves wash over her. She had come a long way from the broken, uncertain girl who had first met Duncan in the forest. She had found strength she didn't know she possessed. And now, standing before him, she realized that the power of their bond was more than just an emotional connection, it was a force that had the ability to change the very world around them. When she opened her eyes, she saw Duncan watching her with a look of pride, and for the first time, she didn't feel out of place. She felt like she belonged. With a determined nod, Emily stepped forward, raising her hand in the air. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and clear. Duncan smiled, his eyes shining with admiration. "Good," he replied, his voice low and full of warmth. "Now, let's see what you can do." Emily took a deep breath and focused on the energy flowing through her. She felt the connection between them, the strength of their bond, and with it, she felt a surge of power. She raised her other hand, and to her amazement, the air around them seemed to shimmer with a soft, golden light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Duncan pause. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded, her heart racing. "Yes," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "I do." Duncan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with promise. "Together, there is nothing we cannot overcome." Emily looked up at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always been afraid of the unknown, of the power she had buried deep within herself, but now, with Duncan by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, she was no longer just an Omega. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would stand by Duncan's side, facing the challenges ahead with courage and strength. As they stood there, in the heart of the forest, the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, casting a warm glow over them both. Emily felt the promise of a new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in her life, she truly believed that anything was possible. Emily and Duncan stood together in the heart of the forest, the weight of the words they had shared still hanging between them. The bond they shared was growing stronger with every passing day, but with that strength came new challenges, challenges that Emily was unsure she was ready to face. As they continued their training, the stakes felt higher. Every time Emily tapped into the power that surged within her, she could feel the pressure of the expectations that came with it. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and that meant something. It meant responsibility, it meant power, and it meant that the future of their pack was tied to her. But Emily wasn't sure if she was ready for that. She had spent her whole life feeling like an outsider, like someone who was never truly meant to fit in. And now, with Duncan by her side, with this bond growing stronger between them, she was terrified that she would let him down. As they walked through the woods one evening, Duncan sensed her hesitation. He had noticed the way she pulled away sometimes, the way she seemed distant, even when she was right there with him. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but firm. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to express the thoughts that were swirling in her head. I don't know if I can do this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can be the Luna, the mate that you need. Duncan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression softening. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing across her cheek. You don't have to be perfect, Emily, he said quietly. You don't have to be anything other than who you are. Emily's heart raced at his touch, and for a moment, she felt a warmth spread through her that chased away the doubt that had been clouding her thoughts. But what if who I am isn't enough, she whispered, her voice trembling. Duncan shook his head, his eyes filled with reassurance. You are enough, he said firmly. You've always been enough. The bond we share isn't about perfection, it's about trust, it's about strength. We're in this together, and together, we can face anything. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him, his words sinking deep into her heart. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could do this. She could be the Luna he needed. She could be his mate. I'm afraid, she admitted, her voice breaking. I'm afraid of what might happen, of failing you, of failing everyone. Duncan's gaze softened even more, and he stepped closer to her, his presence grounding her in a way nothing else ever had. There is no failure here, Emily, he said quietly. Only growth, only learning. And you're not alone in this. You never have to face anything alone again. The sincerity in his voice, the depth of the bond they shared, flooded her heart with a warmth she hadn't known was possible. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her fears lift ever so slightly. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Duncan standing before her, his expression full of understanding and love. Together, he repeated softly. We'll face whatever comes next. Together. Emily nodded, the last of her doubts melting away in the face of Duncan's unwavering support. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure, she wouldn't be facing it alone. She had Duncan by her side, and together, they would face whatever challenges awaited them. As they stood there, the sky above them began to darken, the stars starting to twinkle in the night sky. Emily felt something shift. Within her, a sense of certainty she had never known before. She was ready. Ready to face whatever came next, with Duncan by her side, and the strength of their bond guiding them forward. As the days passed, Emily began to feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had come so far from the broken, insecure Omega she once was, but there were still moments of doubt that crept into her mind. The future was uncertain, and with it came a responsibility she hadn't fully understood when Duncan first revealed the depths of their bond. They spent more time together, training, planning, and growing closer, but every step they took seemed to lead them toward a destiny that Emily was still struggling to accept. One evening, as they stood together on a hill overlooking the Pax land, Emily turned to Duncan, her heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. Do you ever wonder if we're ready for what's coming? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Duncan, always the steady one, turned to her with a look that was both reassuring and gentle. I know we are, he replied, his voice confident. I've always known. Emily felt a warmth spread through her at his words, but the doubt still lingered. I'm not so sure, she admitted, her gaze falling to the ground. I feel like I'm always on the edge of something, like I'm waiting for everything to crumble. Duncan's hand found hers, his fingers strong and comforting against her own. You're not alone in this, Emily, he said, his voice soft but filled with an undeniable strength. We're in this together. And whatever happens, I'll be right beside you. Emily squeezed his hand, trying to find comfort in his words, but the reality of their situation was undeniable. As the Alpha King, Duncan had enemies, people who would stop at nothing to tear them apart. The weight of his position, and the expectations that came with it, were a constant reminder of the danger they faced. Emily had never been a warrior, never trained for battle. She had always been the quiet, overlooked Omega. Now, she was expected to be the Luna of a pack, a symbol of strength and unity. She wasn't sure if she could live up to that. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, she said, her voice cracking with uncertainty. Duncan gently turned her to face him, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. You are exactly what this pack needs, he said, his voice unwavering. You are everything I need. And together, we will build a future, no matter how hard it may be. Emily swallowed, the weight of his words sinking in. She didn't know how she could ever be the Luna the pack needed, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't do it without him. She was more than just his mate. She was his equal, his partner, and together, they could face whatever challenges came their way. "I'm afraid," she whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. "I'm afraid of what might happen if I fail. If I can't protect this pack, or protect you." Duncan's hand cupped her face, his touch gentle but firm. "You won't fail," he said quietly. "You are stronger than you think. You've already proven that. And you don't have to protect me alone. We'll protect each other. Always." Emily closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the warmth of his words, the comfort of his touch. For the first time, she believed him. She believed in herself, in the bond they shared, and in the strength that came from being together. As they stood there, on that quiet hill, the wind whispering through the trees, Emily knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be challenges, there would be doubt, but there would also be love, strength, and a bond that nothing could break. And with Duncan by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, Emily found herself becoming more confident in her new role by Duncan's side. Together, they had begun to make plans for the future of the pack, and Emily was learning more about her responsibilities with each passing day. Despite her initial doubts, she began to realize the depth of the connection she shared with Duncan, a connection that went beyond their bond as mates. It was something powerful, something that made her feel not only safe but also capable. The mornings had become a time of reflection for Emily, where she would sit in the quiet of the forest, feeling the cool breeze on her skin and the weight of the world settle into place. Duncan had given her the space she needed, but he was always close, watching over her in the way only an alpha could. One morning, after a particularly challenging training session, Emily sat alone by the edge of the clearing, her thoughts scattered. Duncan had insisted they push each other to grow, but Emily still couldn't shake the feeling that she was not yet ready to take on the role of Luna. She had seen how the pack looked to Duncan for guidance, how they relied on him for strength, and she wondered if she could ever live up to the expectations. "You're still doubting yourself," Duncan's voice interrupted her thoughts. Emily didn't need to turn around to know it was him. She had become so attuned to his presence that she could sense him even before he spoke. She didn't answer right away, unsure of how to explain the doubts that were swirling in her mind. "I'm not ready," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to be the Luna you need." Duncan sat beside her, his presence a comforting weight next to her. He didn't speak right away, allowing her the space to express her feelings. Finally, he reached out and gently took her hand in his. "You are more than enough," he said softly. "You've been showing me every day that you are the strength this pack needs. Don't underestimate what you're capable of." Emily turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. But there was none. Only unwavering support. "But I don't know if I can do it on my own," she admitted, her voice breaking. Duncan's grip tightened slightly, his eyes softening as he met her gaze. "You're not alone in this, Emily," he said firmly. "You'll never be alone again. We are in this together, and whatever challenges come, we will face them side by side." Emily's chest tightened as she absorbed his words, the weight of her fears lifting just slightly. She had never been one to ask for help, always believing that she had to do everything on her own. But with Duncan, everything felt different. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I really do." Duncan smiled, his hand reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You don't have to do this alone," he repeated. "You have me. And the pack will stand with you as well. They trust you, Emily. I trust you." The warmth in his words made Emily's heart swell, and for the first time, she began to feel the weight of her doubts melt away. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have all the answers right now. All she had to do was trust in herself, trust in the bond they shared, and trust that together, they could face whatever came next. As they sat there in the quiet of the forest, the first rays of the sun breaking through the trees, Emily felt something shift within her. It wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual realization that she was already becoming the Luna she was meant to be. The journey wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer afraid. With Duncan by her side, she was ready to step into the future and face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they were unstoppable.